wasn't much excitement during launch, but ULA will be happy once we get to stage separation, which is coming up almost 15 minutes after launch, so about 5 minutes from now.
Centaur system performance remains nominal throughout this burn, continuing to see stable values on our fuel and oxidizer tank pressures, main vehicle battery temperatures and pressures, and continue to see good pressures on our helium and hydrazine storage bottles. Telemetry quality has been good throughout this burn, only seeing very brief minor dropouts. Now approximately 1 minute remaining in the burn.
So once again, after Starliner separates from Centaur coming up in about 4 minutes, Starliner will circularize its orbit with an orbital insertion burn. Again, about 30 seconds to main engine cutoff.
Chamber pressures on both RL-10s continue to look good.
Now, ahead of main engine cutoff, we are seeing good tank pressure on Starliner itself. Batteries are in a nominal temperature, good pressure sensor readings from Starliner as it prepares to free fly for the first time in orbit.
Standing by for main engine cutoff. And we have MECO, main engine cutoff. Body rate responses have remained very stable. Now passing 12 minutes into flight.
Now Starliner will stay attached to Centaur again until about 15 minutes. Expected to separate at 14 minutes and 58 seconds after liftoff. And that will be the first time Starliner free flies in orbit. And at that point, Richard Jones and his team in Houston will have full control over the vehicle. And they will set it up for an orbital insertion burn that will take place 16 minutes after separation.
Approximately 2 minutes now remaining until OFT capsule separation. Body rate responses continue to look very stable throughout this coast.
So you're looking at the Boeing Mission Control Center there. At this point, they have transitioned to a mission support room. The people you're seeing sitting on console designed, tested, and built Starliner. They are the experts on the systems. So if flight controllers need any help, they will be the ones answering the call.
13 minutes, 30 seconds into flight.
Oh, in just over a minute, we're expecting to hear that Starliner has separated from the vehicle.
And about 1 minute now remaining until OFT separation. Body rates in the roll, pitch, and yaw direction, all very close to beginning the initial thruster firings for system thermal conditioning. System response looks good.
Now once again, Centaur
and
will
about 30
continue
seconds away from spacecraft SAP.
burning for about another 5 minutes.
Now passing 6 minutes into flight. now standing by for Centaur is now 95 miles in altitude, 570 miles downrange distance, traveling at 12,000 miles an hour. And we have good indication of separation of the OFT
RL-10
capsule.
engines continue to propel Starliner. There it is. ULA making up for a successfully completed their piece of the mission. A flatter trajectory Starliner and at free flying thrust again the first time that 3.5 G forces. From here, the Johnson Space Center flight mission controllers for the dual-engine Centaur will be flying Starliner on an Atlas V. We will hear reports exclusively from there. Continue to head to orbit.
Throughout the Centaur burn.
And Starliner's software has been switched to orbit mode, meaning the spacecraft is executing the commands it needs for
just under 5
in
minutes
space
now remaining
following
in the burn.
A successful launch into orbit, into the orbital trajectory. This is just one step flight controllers are taking in configuring Starliner now that it's flying on its own. Flight controllers are setting up for the orbital insertion burn, which will
Centaur
take
is now
place in about 15 minutes, a
altitude,
little over 15
800
minutes.
miles downrange distance,
And that'll
traveling
circularize
at
Starliner's
12,700 miles
orbit
per hour.
as it sets off to chase the International Space Station. The team here is also turning off several systems that were needed for powered flight, but are not necessary now that Starliner is in orbit.
Body rate responses
While some are turned off,
all
others will
very
be
close to
turned on, such as the thruster housings that'll be used to maneuver Starliner in space.
That means Atlas is
and the
flying
solar arrays.
almost exactly where it needs
The
to be.
thrusters will steer Starliner through orbit, and the solar arrays will, of course, convert the sun's energy into electric energy to charge the spacecraft batteries.
The Centaur has intentionally left Starliner in an elliptical trajectory that would make it easy for the spacecraft and, more importantly, its future crews to come back to Earth at this point if there were a problem.
We've been through a
But that means it's all on Starliner to make it the rest of the way into a stable orbit and on track for the space station docking.
To propel Starliner.
This is where Starliner's orbital maneuvering and attitude control engines come into play. Those 20 engines can provide each up to 1,400 pounds of thrust, which is more than enough to neatly heave Starliner that last little bit into orbit. They'll fire for about 40 seconds, setting Starliner on the right path not only for docking with the space station, but also a series of demonstrations that Starliner will perform before docking.
And those demonstrations will prove that Starliner is ready to safely dock with the space station. They actually began on the launch pad when we performed a check to make sure that Starliner's GPS and navigation systems agreed that it was indeed on the launch pad. After the upcoming orbital insertion burns, the demonstrations will continue so that ground controllers can ensure that the spacecraft systems are functioning correctly.
1,200 miles
when these first demos are complete, Starliner will resume its path to the International Space Station, and our systems here
now the two control rooms you are looking at on the left, that is ULA's Denver Operations Control Center.
Are doing exactly what they are supposed to do.
They are a backup control room for the control room on the right, which is the actual Atlas Spaceflight Operations Center.
Minutes until it takes place. So let's go back to Florida, where Josh and Marie have watched a spectacular morning liftoff.
Brandy, it was a beautiful launch from here in Florida. It took off right here behind us. As you can see, everyone is
the sun is starting to rise. There's a little bit of
a rocket plume left over there behind us. You might have noticed
the rocket left back there, but it was just, I mean, it was stunning to see. I mean, I know you weren't looking from this view, you were looking much closer, but I mean, we just turned around in our seats to watch it here, and we could feel the rumble. And I know you didn't see people celebrating in the control rooms because, you know, their job's not done at liftoff. It goes
Centaur
system
beyond performance
that
remains nominal throughout this burn, continuing to see stable values on our fuel and oxidizer tank pressures,
again, and
main vehicle battery temperatures and pressures.
So happy about
good pressures on
this
our
accomplishment.
helium and
obviously this is just the beginning of the mission, but such a huge momentous occasion.
Telemetry quality has been good throughout this burn.
We're actually hearing that in the BNCC,
minor
Tori
dropouts.
Pedrati is with Louis Atchison, who was Starliner's very first launch conductor and saw us through a successful first launch. Tori and Louis got to be feeling pretty good right now.
Yes, thank you, Josh. That is, it's really excellent to have Louis here and to have, take him away from console for just a minute to talk with us. So, Louis, I know that you and Chris Ferguson have been very close through this entire process, and I know that he asked you to create the launch procedures. Can you give us some details about that?
Sure. I think, as you all know, Chris has a very vested interest in how the launch procedures were put together.
Will
I started with the program probably about 7 years ago. About a year in, I was still a flight test engineer on the program.
Main engine
happened to run into Chris in the elevator on the way to work one morning. And quite frankly, I didn't know he knew my name, but he said, "Hey, Lewis, if you got a little bit of spare time, can you work and maybe see if you can figure out how these launch procedures are going to work for the program?" And of course, I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, spare time. I can find time to
main engine cutoff. We are seeing good tank pressure on Starliner itself. Batteries,
that began basically a 6-year journey
good pressure
on finding a unique way to integrate the United Launch Alliance Atlas V launch procedure, which is a tried and tested launch process. With something that had never flown before, our space capsule, and we're a lot different than any of the other payloads that they've flown.
And we have
so as you can imagine, we had to merge several different cultures. Our flight control team, which is really homegrown from NASA, our ground control team, which is here at C3PF.
Now Starliner will stay attached to Centaur again until about 15 minutes.
That's correct.
Separate at 14 minutes and 58 seconds after liftoff.
So working through those processes, procedures, and finding a way to integrate all that. And oh, by the way, we have to find time to load a crew one day.
Richard Jones and his team in Houston will have full
taking that and marrying those things up so that everything comes together for an instantaneous launch window. So today, fortunately, we made our window. It's a first flight program. We saw some challenges over the evening, but we've got a world-class team here, and they were able to pull through the little things that we were seeing. Fortunately, we've had a good training program along the way, and it's just an incredibly exciting day.
I know, and seeing so far a successful flight has just been one of the best experiences I've had working on this program. But so you mentioned, we had a little bit of setbacks, some issues that we needed to work through. So I'm guessing today didn't go exactly according to plan.
No first flight ever does. So yeah, we were working a couple issues with the comm subsystem. Fortunately, the flight control team was able to work it out.
At the Boeing Mission Control Center there.
A few days ago, we had a couple issues with the hatch, which we were able to, which we learned about when we did our integrated day of launch test, which was actually a fantastic test.
They are the experts on
we did a couple of modifications to account for the fact that when there's pressure changes outside, we need to bleed a little bit of that pressure off so we get the hatch open. You'd be surprised how just a little pressure difference over a large surface area makes it really tough to open. So we were able to get that fixed. So the pad team here and the recovery team in the desert are going to be able to open that side hatch pretty seamlessly.
Oh, that's excellent. And there's nothing like a flight test to learn these things, right? So this is the reason why.
And about 1 minute now remaining until
I completely agree.
separation.
And this being the first launch that I've had the opportunity to work in a control center right next to the launch vehicle. We've simmed, we've trained for this, and there was nothing quite like the feeling of the monitors and the floor shaking after that rocket took off today. So it was a
body rates and the roll pitch and yaw direction.
I completely agree. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the team? Here in Florida, back in Houston, anybody watching?
Sure. So first of all, I have to thank my family for all the time, patience, and effort that was put in over the past several years. We work a lot of long hours to make these kind of things happen, and I realize that they're at home watching, eagerly excited about the next part of the mission, which will be the recovery operation that I'm a part of, and also the team.
Now standing by for
this is one of the greatest team sports you could ever possibly imagine, and it takes a lot of people to make all this happen, and a lot of people need to be at the right place at the right time and know the right stuff in order to make this instantaneous.
And we have good indication of separation of the OFT capsule.
Right. Well, thank you, Lewis. It's been great to have you here. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us.
Completed their piece of
Josh,
the mission.
Marie, back to you.
Starliner is free flying for the first time.
Thanks so much, Tori.
Well,
before we go back to JSC as they're getting ready for the orbital insertion burn, I just want to send a message out to everyone watching, not here from Florida. If you've never seen a rocket launch before, it's like nothing you've ever seen. I mean, it quite literally looks like
and Starliner's software has been switched to orbit mode,
so the next
meaning
time
the spacecraft is executing the commands it needs for
and if you're in the States,
operating in space following a successful launch into orbit.
Be prepared for a lot of traffic. Don't expect to be going anywhere anytime soon after launch because we expect the place to be pretty
now that
jammed
it's
up
flying
just
on
like
its
it
own.
was during the space shuttle
Flight controllers are setting up
Yeah,
for the orbital insertion burn, which will take place in about 15 minutes, a little over 15 minutes.
This is actually some video that we
And
got
that'll
of the pad team
circularize Starliner's
right as they were
orbit
closing up
as it
the white
sets
room,
off to chase the
showing
International
us,
Space Station.
their
The
enthusiasm.
team here is
before
also
they got
turning
off, the
off
pad.
several systems that were needed for
taking a
powered
team
flight,
moment
but are
to
not
reflect on
necessary
the
now that
history of this day.
Starliner is in
Yeah,
orbit.
I mean, and you don't always see it when
While some
we're
are turned
doing
off,
these
others will be
operational things,
turned
but
on, such as the
people
thruster
behind the scenes,
housings
I mean, you
that'll
saw
be
them
used
in
to
that
maneuver
embrace there.
Starliner in space,
It's really like a
and
family.
the solar arrays.
NASA, Boeing, ULA, we
thrusters
work
will
side by
steer
side together every day. These
Starliner
people
through
putting in
orbit,
these long
and the
hours,
solar
they're
arrays
doing
will,
this
of course,
together,
convert
everybody working towards a
the
common
sun's
goal. And
energy
you saw the
into
culmination of
electric
that when
energy
we
to
had
charge
that
the spacecraft
instantaneous
batteries.
liftoff on the first try.
Exactly, and
The Centaur has
like you said,
intentionally
it's
left
very much like a
Starliner
family. A lot of
in
these
an
folks are
elliptical
going to be spending
trajectory
Christmas,
that would make it easy
making
for the
sure
spacecraft
Starliner
and,
is
more
doing
importantly,
well
its
past
future
the International
crews to
Space
come back to
Station.
Earth at this
It just
point if
takes
there
so
were a
much
problem.
hard work and dedication
But that means
to
it's
do what
all
they
on
do.
Starliner to make it the rest of the way into a stable
And
orbit
we
and
want
on
to go
track
back
for
over
the
to
space station
Houston.
docking.
We are standing by.
This is where Starliner's
before too
orbital
long,
maneuvering
Starliner
and
is going
attitude
to be in
control
orbit,
engines
so
come
we
into
want to
play.
get
Those
an
20
update from
engines
Steve
can
and Brandy
provide
to
each
see
up
how
to
things are going over there. Hi,
1,400
guys.
pounds of thrust, which is more than enough to
Thank you, folks.
neatly
It
heave
is,
Starliner
it is
that last
looking
little
very
bit
good
into
here in
orbit.
Houston.
They'll
We
fire
are
for about
about
40 seconds, setting
5.5
Starliner on
minutes
the right
away from
path,
the
not only
orbital
for docking
insertion
with the
burn
space
that's going
station,
to
but also a
circularize
series of demonstrations that
the orbit
Starliner
of
will perform
Starliner.
before
Starliner
docking.
is currently flying over
And
those demonstrations will prove that Starliner is ready to safely dock with the space station. About 25
They
minutes ago, began chase on the launch pad when we performed a check to make sure that Starliner's GPS and navigation systems agreed that it was indeed on the launch pad. After the upcoming orbital insertion burns, the demonstrations will continue so that ground controllers can ensure that the spacecraft systems are functioning correctly. When these first demos are complete, Starliner will resume its path to the International Space Station and our systems here. And it's going to take telling us that these early 24 hours for the Starliners are doing exactly International Space Station on this orbital flight test.
We still have a few minutes before that orbital insertion burn, about 13 minutes until it takes place. So let's go back to Florida, where Josh and Marie have watched
all the systems are
spectacular
working,
morning
that everything's
liftoff.
doing what it's supposed to. After all, Starliner is
Brandy,
flying
it
itself
was
to this.
a beautiful launch
even
from
though
here
it's
in
going
Florida. It took off
Mach 25
right here
right now,
behind us.
17,500 miles an hour.
The sun
to
is
catch
starting
up
to rise.
the
There's a
space
little bit of a
station.
rocket plume
Still
left
gonna take
over
a little
there
time.
behind us.
Make
No
sure all
rocket
the
left back
systems
there, but it
are
was
working
just,
the
I
way
mean, it
they're
was
supposed to.
stunning
Make sure
to see.
Starliner knows where
I know
it is,
you
where
weren't
it's going,
looking
and
from
we'll reach
this
it in
view, you were
time.
looking much closer, but I mean, we just turned
minutes
around
away
in our
from that
seats
orbital
to
insertion burn.
watch it here, and we
Team
could
here on
feel
the
the
ground is,
rumble, and I
following
know
along, making sure
you
that
didn't
all the
see
systems
people
are
celebrating in the control
cooking
rooms
up and,
because, you know, their
talking
job's
like
not
they're
done
supposed to as
at
we do
liftoff.
get
It
closer
goes
to that.
beyond
That'll
that,
be
much
about a
further,
40-second
and so
burn. Again, moving
people
space
are, I
the
think, now
Starliner
just beginning
into
to
the right orbit to catch up with
breathe
space
again,
station.
And it's
so
going to be the
folks are just
4 OMAC engines that are on
so
Starliner.
happy
They
about
are
this
orbital
accomplishment.
maneuvering
I mean,
and
obviously
control
this is just the
engines,
beginning of the
1,500
mission,
pounds of thrust each,
such a
so
huge
combined a
momentous occasion this morning.
6,000-pound kick.
And
to
we're
push
actually hearing
Starliner
that
a
in
little
the
bit,
BNCC,
a little bit higher, a little bit
Tori
faster,
Pedrati
raise
is with
the
Lewis
orbit,
Atchison, who
and
was
get everything
Starliner's
together.
very
Of course,
first
those
launch
engines are going to play a
conductor,
big
and
role
saw us through
throughout the
successful
next
first
24
launch.
hours
Tori and
as
Lewis
the
gotta be feeling pretty good right
Starliner
now.
makes its run
Thank
at the
you, Josh.
International
That
Space
is
Station.
It's really excellent
We
to
are
have
now
Lewis
about
here
3
and to
minutes
have,
and
you know,
14
take
seconds
him away
away
from
from the
console for
orbital
just a minute to
insertion
talk with us. So,
This, of course,
Lewis,
follows a
I know
terrific
that
launch
you
this
and
morning,
Chris Ferguson have been very close through this entire process, and I know that he asked you to create the launch procedures. Can you give us some details about that?
Sure, I think, as you all know, Chris has a very vested interest in how the launch procedures are put together. I started with the program probably about 7 years ago. About a year in, I was still a flight test engineer on the program. Happened to run into
controllers
Chris
here are
in the
looking
elevator on the way
carefully
to
at
work
all
one
of their
morning, and
systems, making sure
quite frankly, I
everything's
didn't know
good.
he knew my
It's
name.
very quiet
but,
here in the
he
control
said,
room,
"Hey,
which
Lewis,
is always a
if
good
you got a
sign.
little bit of
That
spare
means
time,
the
can you
controllers
work
are
and maybe
heads
see if
down,
you can
watching
figure out how
over the
these launch
systems,
procedures are going to work for the
and
program?"
keeping
And
track of
of
everything
course, I
that's
was like,
going
"Oh yeah,
on.
sure, spare time.
Just
I can find time to
the Middle East
gen up
now.
some launch procedures." So that began basically a 6-year journey. journey on finding a unique way to integrate the United Launch Alliance
We're also seeing here that Starliner's reaction control system engines, they are sort of the fine adjustments,
with something that had never flown before, our space capsule, and we're a lot different than any of the other payloads that they've flown. So as you can imagine, we had to merge several different cultures. Our flight control team, which is really homegrown from NASA, our ground control team, which is here
Less than 2 minutes to go until
at
that
C3PF that performs a lot of the spacecraft power-up activities.
And you're located here in the C3PF, correct?
That's correct,
yeah.
right. I'm Florida local. So working through those processes, procedures, and finding a way to integrate all that. And oh, by the way, we have to find time to load a crew one day. And so taking that and marrying those things up so that everything comes together for an instantaneous launch window. So today, fortunately, we made our window. It's a first flight program. We saw some challenges over the evening, but we've got a world-class team here, and they were able to pull through the little things that we were seeing. Fortunately, we've had a good training program along the way. And it's just an incredibly exciting day.
I know, and seeing so far a successful flight has just been one of the best experiences I've had working on this program. But so you mentioned, we had a little bit of setbacks, some issues that we needed to work through. So I'm guessing today didn't go exactly according to plan.
No first flight ever does. So yeah, we were working a couple issues with the comm subsystem. Fortunately, the flight control team was able to work it out before we went to fly today. A few days ago, we had a couple issues with the hatch, which we were able to, which we learned about when we did our integrated day of launch test, which was actually a fantastic test. We did a couple of modifications to account for the fact that when there's pressure changes outside, we need to bleed a little bit of that pressure off so we can get the hatch open. You'd be surprised how just a little pressure difference over a large surface area makes it really tough to open. So we were able to get that fixed so that the pad team here and the recovery team in the desert are going to be able to open that side hatch pretty seamlessly.
Oh, that's excellent. And there's nothing like a flight test to learn these things, right? So this is the reason why we test.
I completely agree. And this being the first launch that I've had the opportunity to work in a control center right next to the launch vehicle, we've simmed, we've trained for this, and there was nothing quite like the feeling of the monitors and the floor shaking after that rocket took off today. So it was an amazing electric atmosphere here this morning.
I completely agree. Is there anything that you'd like to share with the team, here in Florida, back in Houston? Anybody watching?
Sure. So first of all, I have to thank my family for all the time, patience, and effort that was put in over the past several years. We work a lot of long hours to make these kind of things happen, and I realize that they're at home watching, eagerly excited about the next part of the mission, which will be the recovery operation that I'm a part of. And also the team, right? This is one of the greatest team sports you could ever possibly imagine, and it takes a lot of people to make all this happen, and a lot of people need to be at the right place at the right time and know the right stuff in order to make this instantaneous launch window happen, and quite frankly, everything happen on this program.
Right. Well, thank you, Louis. It's been great to have you here. Thank you so much for taking some time to talk to us.
Thank you.
Josh, Marie, back to you.
Thank you.
And controllers are maneuvering
Thanks so much, Tori. Before we go back to JSC as they're getting ready for the orbital insertion burn, I just want to, send a message out to everyone watching, not here from Florida. If you've never seen a rocket launch before, it's like nothing you've ever seen. I mean, it quite literally looks like another sun is rising up into the sky. So the next time we do this, there's going to be people on board. And if you're in the States, you can drive down here to Florida and come watch us fly.
Yes, just be prepared for a lot of traffic. Don't expect to be going anywhere anytime soon after launch,
Controllers
because we expect the place to be pretty jammed up, just like it was during the space shuttle days.
Yeah, I think there was upwards of 1 million people here. Now, this is actually some video that we got of the pad team right as they were closing up the white room, showing us their enthusiasm before they got off the pad. Just taking a team moment to reflect on the history of this day.
Yeah, I mean, and you don't always see it when we're doing these operational things, but the people behind the scenes, I mean, you saw them in that embrace there. It's really like a family. NASA, Boeing, ULA, we work side by side together every day. These people putting in these long hours, they're doing this together, everybody working towards a common goal, and you saw the culmination of that when we had that instantaneous liftoff on the first try.
Exactly, and like you said, it's very much like a family. A lot of these folks are going to be spending Christmas, making sure Starliner is doing well attached to the International Space Station. It just takes so much hard work and dedication to do what they do.
Yep. So. And we want to go back over to Houston. We are standing by. Before too long, Starliner is going to be in orbit, so we want to get an update from Steve and Brandy to see how things are going over there. Hi, guys.
Thank you, folks. It is looking very good here in Houston, We are about 5.5 minutes away from the orbital insertion burn that's going to circularize the orbit of Starliner. Starliner is currently flying over Southeast Europe as it begins its chase. About 25 minutes ago, begun its chase of the International Space Station.
That's right. The International Space Station was about 260 miles over the Great Australian Bight, south of Western Australia, when Starliner launched today, and the crew members on board were sent up some video of their launch. So I know that they were probably following along and cheering with everybody here on the ground as well. You know, they're looking forward to seeing Starliner dock to the space station tomorrow.
And it's going to take a little more than 24 hours for the Starliner to reach the International Space Station on this orbital flight test. The regular docking scenario will not take that long when there is a crew on board, but since this is the first flight of Starliner, want to make sure that all the systems are working, that everything's doing what it's supposed to. After all, Starliner is flying itself to this. So even though it's going Mach 25 right now, 17,500 miles an hour, to catch up to the space station, still going to take a little time. Make sure all the systems are working the way they're supposed to. Make sure Starliner knows where it is. Controllers are watching the attitude of Starliner
right. We're now about
as
4
it
minutes away
positions
from
itself,
that orbital insertion
and
burn.
looking at
The team here on the ground
spacecraft
is following along, making
flight.
sure that all the systems are hooking up and talking like they're supposed to as we do get closer to that. That'll be about a 40-second burn. Again, moving the Starliner into the right orbit to catch up with space station.
And it's going to be the 4 OMAC engines that are on Starliner. They are orbital maneuvering and control engines, 1,500 pounds of thrust each, so combined a 6,000-pound kick to push Starliner a little bit higher, a little bit faster, raise the orbit, and get everything together. Of course, those engines are going to play a big role throughout the next 24 hours as the Starliner makes its run at the International Space Station. And we are now about 3 minutes and 14 seconds away from the orbital
that was supposed to take place about 5.5
this, of
minutes
course,
ago
follows
has been delayed.
a terrific launch this
team
morning
on the ground
and
is seeing
the power
Starliner
of the Atlas V,
not in the,
putting
in the
Starliner on
the
exact right course and speeding it from 0
the next chance to
orbital velocity in just about 11.5 minutes, I think, of powered flight.
It's amazing how little time it takes to get to space.
So controllers here are looking carefully at all of their systems, making sure everything's good. It's very quiet here in the control room, which is always a good sign. That means the controllers are heads down, watching over the systems and keeping track of everything that's going on just above the Mideast now. Currently, Starliner is using its 100-pound class thrusters to maneuver in space. We're also seeing here 37 that Starliner's first flight control system engines, they are, for the fine adjustments, 100-pound class engines. And flight controllers are small adjustments as Starliner adjusts its attitude moving above Earth. The OMAC engines are, of course, 1,500-pound class thrusters, each one of them. There's 4 of them on Starliner. That's what they'll use to complete the orbital insertion burn. And you can see here the control room here in Houston, Starliner Mission Control. This is, of course, a flight control room that's been used before for NASA missions, but this is the inaugural Starliner mission, so it's the first time that it's been used for this Boeing spacecraft.
The next opportunity
and of course,
for that.
Controllers are used to this room and have spent a number of hours in here doing simulations and everything. It's a very professional crew, and many of these folks are veterans of the shuttle mission. Certainly Richard Jones, the flight director who is overseeing this ascent and entry team. And Flight Director Richard Jones we are reports that we are in a stable orbit. Insertion burn. Starliner is in a stable orbit. Are not working any technical issues. The OMAC engines are getting positioned to make that 40-second firing that will circularize Starliner's orbit and get it into a position to continue its chase to the International Space Station, which is itself currently coming up on Central America.
Once again, Starliner is now in a stable orbit. They've got it in a stable position, but the teams here on the ground are working through what the best next steps for Starliner should be.